So Tawa, Tongse, everybody. Nisha Nitsi Kason. Hello and welcome. My name is Nisha. The Indigenous coordinator here at Aboriginal Health, and we're so happy you're all joining us for this very exciting session of Pesca-Pick. So before we begin, I'd like to start by conducting a land acknowledgement and begin our day in a good way. So this session is being recorded and conducted from the territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. We raise our hands to those nations for being the stewards of these lands since time immemorial. So today's session will be welcoming Elder Doris Fox, who is from the Musqueam Nation, and she'll be sharing a little bit with our health authority about how colonization has impacted healthcare. So just a little bit of a background, Pesca-Pick sessions are created by the Indigenous Cultural Safety Team, part of the Aboriginal Health Department, and the purpose of this program is to provide healthcare practitioners and those folks who are working within the healthcare field with more information about Indigenous cultural safety. Our team is experiencing a few technical delays today. We're having some poor internet connection issues, so if there's a little bit of a lag, just sharing that's the reason why. We will have a Q&A at the end of this session for approximately 15 minutes. So if you have any questions for Elder Doris, please put them into the chat box. We're going to do our absolute best to try to answer as many questions as possible. So keep putting those questions in the chat box. We're also going to have sessions bi-weekly for Pesca-Pick. So we're going to put a link in the chat box here to our Eventbrite page, and we encourage you to sign up for future sessions as well. Well, without further ado, I'm going to invite Elder Doris to turn on her screen and begin sharing. Welcome, Elder Doris.
Thank you, Nisha. Welcome, everyone. Me, it's Musqueam and Doris Fox. Welcome, everyone, to the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territory of the Musqueam people. My name is Doris Fox, and I'm an elder from Musqueam. Today we're going to be talking about something that is a little difficult for a lot of people. I just want you to know that if you're having difficulties, for you to please let us know so we can do something to reach out and help you understand what's going on. Excuse me. I was asked to talk about colonization in the healthcare system. And colonization is something that a lot of people don't understand. People say, well, how do we decolonize? And the thing is that there isn't a list of 1 through 10 that I can just hand you a sheet and say, this is how you decolonize, because it's much deeper subject than that. I wrote a couple of things down that I'm just going to read, and then I'll just put the book down and go from there. Colonizing wasn't just taking away our language, songs, dances, music, ceremonies, values, beliefs, history, the very essence of who we are. Our entire way of life was stolen, beaten, raped, humiliated, and shamed out of us. It was against the law for us to even own a car when I was young. I remember the first time that my dad and grandpa bought a car, and they were so excited because now they were allowed to buy a car when it was something that everybody else in Canada was well within their rights to do. Excuse me. We couldn't sue our tormentors, our torturers, the molesters. We weren't allowed to even bring them to court to make them pay for what they'd done. It was against the law for us. I remember when I was very small that my mom was crying so hard, like her heart was breaking. And I found out later that it was because one of our relatives in Tsleil-Waututh had passed away, and she wasn't allowed to go to visit our family. the Indian agent said no, that too many of us had already left the community. They were scared we were going to riot, or I don't know what they were afraid of, but they wouldn't let my mom go. Things like that happened all the time. We just weren't allowed to leave our villages. The Indian agent was the law. And people go, what the heck is that? They were the ones that were the representatives of the federal government, and they were the ones who enforced the laws that were written to protect us, they said. It was really hard because often they were very cruel, very mean. They were the ones who would come into the community and along with the RCMP and take away our children and drag them off to residential school. So people often ask, did I go to residential school? And I didn't. And the only reason why I didn't go to residential school was because my mom would hide us. She'd say, the Indian agent is coming, go hide in the bushes. And we'd run off into the trees, into the forest and hide. And it was always so scary. And I would hide under the trees because the branches would come right down to the ground. And I didn't know why I was afraid of him. I just knew that I was because my mom was afraid. And we could hear him clumping through the bushes with his big feet and his big boots. And once I saw his boots pass by the tree that I was hiding under, and I was so scared. Everything that my mom did to protect us from going to residential school was because she had gone to residential school. Pretty much everybody in my family older than me, and even most of the ones my age, had all gone to residential school. So we were the oddity instead of being like the rest of my cousins and my friends in the community who were forced to go to residential school. Everything that made us us was taken away from us by law. Can you imagine if you have a history of coming from the Ukraine or Russia or Spain or anywhere in the world where you have traditional songs and ceremonial wear, costumes, if you will, for lack of a better way of explaining. If all of that was stripped away and your language was taken, everything that made you special and unique taken away from you. It wasn't just fear that we felt. Can you imagine how hard it would be if your first language was your traditional language and it was illegal for you to speak it? That you would be thrown in jail, man, woman, or child. You would be thrown in jail if you were caught speaking it. The RCMP and the federal government paid people from our community and from outside the community to come and sneak around the village and listen to the houses to make sure no one was speaking language or passing along songs or teaching the younger ones anything. And if they were caught, the RCMP would show up in short order and drag whoever was in the house away. Often these people would disappear, not come home. And when the families would approach them and ask them where their family members were, they would say, oh, We turned them loose. We don't know what happened to them, knowing full well that they were murdered, beaten to death for defying the laws. Can you imagine that? If another country came to Canada and took us over and made us speak a different language other than English, how scary would that be? Especially if you couldn't understand the language and you could just never quite learn it. So a lot of our elders just didn't talk. They didn't talk out there, out into the city. They would bring someone with them who could speak English. How scary for them. To not be able to be you. To have everything that makes you you, that makes you unique, stripped away from you. There were laws put in place to make sure that they would, quote unquote, get the Indian out of us. As if there was something wrong with being who we were, who we are. And you can imagine that as that goes down the history, how much confusion that's caused our people. Can you imagine being told your whole life you're not good enough? That there's something wrong with you because you have beautiful brown skin and dark eyes. Can you imagine being told that your voice is funny and you have a funny accent because you speak your own language? My great-grandfather Manette, he went underground to teach his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren the language, the stories, the songs. Under threat of death, and he did it anyway. He made sure that a bunch of us would carry on our ways. I was going to say old ways, but it's our ways. It's not old. Some of us still live with those values, those beliefs, those knowing the history, being able to drive around the city and the Lower Mainland and point out our landmarks, our homes, longhouses, sacred spaces, ceremonial places, ancient trails that had been there for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. To be able to go to these places of gathering where we went to gather different berries. To be able to go to the mountains where the mountain goats used to come to gather our wool for making our Salish blankets. He made sure all of that was passed down because he knew and understood and used to say, don't hold on to this knowledge, baby. You pass it on because once you die, it goes with you. I didn't teach you this to hold on to it. So I do share. I pass it on to my kids, now to my grandchildren, to my nieces and nephews, to anyone in my community and family who wants to learn. I pass it on. And even if they don't want to learn, I make sure and just kind of get in there a little bit. So I know you're kind of wondering, what does this all have to do with health? It has a lot to do with health. When you remove that important little part of a person, the thing that makes them them, they flounder. It's almost like you fight for air, even. How can you live without knowing who you are and where you come from? How can you be without having that heart that makes us us? I know I'm getting emotional because it's very emotional for me. I'm on that borderline where things were starting to change, where the laws were starting to change for us as Homu, as Musqueam Homu. So I can still remember that old time. And I still remember the stories that my grandpa used to say about things that happened. The hardships that they went through when they lost their songs, their right to sing their songs out in the open for the world to hear, which is what they were meant to be sung out loud, shared with nature and the world, Mother Earth and the sun and the sky and the stars and the moon and all the people. To know that was our rightful place to be, our divine rightful place to be, a part of that nature and the world. And then for all of that to be taken away, can you imagine how hard that would be? You are not allowed to be you anymore. You cannot be that beautiful individual that you were raised to be, because you'll go to jail if you do. Can you imagine how hard it was for my ancestors to walk in this world and not be able to claim, to look at another person and say, I am Homo. I am human being. Because the white man didn't know what that word meant. So it became illegal to call us heathens because we didn't believe in their God. But what they didn't realize was that we had a very personal relationship with Creator, with Great Spirit, one that they could never understand. So they said we were heathens or atheists, that we were less than dogs, to be kicked and beaten and abused, and our women raped whenever they felt like it. And some people say, oh, that never happened. Yeah, it did. I remember the names of the RCMP who used to come into the community and pick up some of our young women and take them up to the graveyard and rape them, because they knew nothing would happen to them. So knowing this little bit of my history, our history, it kind of gives you a clue. If you can imagine the things that we've been through, and I'm barely scratching the surface. If you can imagine and put yourself in our shoes, walk a mile in our moccasins, and imagine what it felt like. And I've had people tell me, why should I be ashamed? Why should I be guilty? It wasn't me that did that. No, it wasn't. But it was your ancestors who did that. And that abuse is still a part of you as well. That's colonization. That gets handed down generation after generation after generation, down to you. The guilt and the shame that your families felt at our abusers' hands gets handed down to you as well. So when you see one of us walking down the street, look at us, smile at us, acknowledge us as a fellow human being. Colonization didn't just take away all of that, the us that made us us. It became like a virus or a germ or a bug inside of us. My grandpa used to say, my great grandpa, he said, it gets into us, and he'd go like this, and it changes us. It becomes a part of your blood and a part of our body. It changes us, and he would go like this. That thing, he said, and he said it in Hunkaminam. But I didn't know what it meant, that word, until I got much older and realized when he was going like this, he was talking about DNA. Something that our people have known for thousands of years before science is finally catching up with us. He said it changes us so that we feel the shame that they say, you should be ashamed, you should feel guilty. So a lot of us did. A lot of us still do. So you ask, why colonization? What effect does it have? Because it changes our DNA, because it changes our blood, it makes it really hard to get back to who we are, to bring the past to the present, so that we can rejoice and feel proud of who we are and be honored to be Hualmu. My sister phoned me one day and she was like, are you okay? And I'm going, yeah, I'm fine. She goes, no, how are you really? And I said, I'm good. I'm just cold. I can't warm up. And for any of you who know me, I hardly ever, ever, ever get cold. I'm always warm or hot. And she said, I'll be right there. And she only lives like 4 or 5 blocks away. And she ran uphill to get to me. And she took one look at me and dialed 911. She said, you're going to the hospital. And I went, I'm fine, I'm just cold. And I was shivering. And she put her hand on me and she said, you're on fire. So I went to the hospital in the ambulance. And the doctor said, if you had waited 15 minutes more, you would be dead, because my appendix was about to burst. So luckily, she just had a feeling. And that's part of us. People call it mother's intuition now, but that's a part of who we are. We just know things. And so while I was waiting for the surgeon to get there, they, of course, drugged me up like crazy. And I either feel nothing from the drug, or else it works so well on me, I become unconscious. So I'm laying in my bed and my sister went to go and get a drink for me. And I woke up with somebody slapping my face. And I was like, ow, ow, what? Stop. But still not fully into my mind or fully awake. And then this woman grabbed my arm and is yanking me so hard, trying to get me up. I don't know why she was trying to get me up. But she pulled so hard that she dislocated my shoulder. And I remember hearing it pop and thinking, that should hurt. But because of the drugs I was on, I didn't feel much of anything. My sister came in and caught her, and she screamed at the top of her lungs until nurses and doctors came running, told her that she should be fired because she could see the handprint on my face from the nurse slapping my face, and witnessed her almost yanking me right off the bed. She needs to get up, she hollered. And my sister was having none of it. Told her to get out, that they better fire her for abusing me that way. How many others has she hurt, she asked. And of course, nobody said anything. So I wish I could say that that was a rarity, that was something that hardly ever happens in our hospitals, but it's not. When I was 12 years old, a nurse was told to get me up because they had given me so many drugs because I kept waking up to get my tonsils out that I couldn't wake up. And so she was tasked with getting me up and walking me up and down the hall, and she was very angry. And I found out later it was because it was the end of her shift. She wanted to go home. And so I couldn't walk because I was on so many drugs, whatever the anesthetic was. And so I collapsed and I hit my head on the door, and I remember thinking, ow. And then I was out. And then she's dragging me down the hall by my arm, telling me to get up, get up, get up. I was 12. Things like this happen all the time. And I've thought a lot about why. I've come to think that perhaps it's because the government has told everybody in one way or another, by action or deed or word, that we aren't good enough, that we are less than dogs, like they used to say. And it's hard because I think, how could anybody think that terribly about another human being? What happened in their life to make them hate us so much? To make them turn away when I walk down the street, instead of acknowledging the smile and the nod that I give them. And then I realize everybody is just as colonized in a different way than we are. They are taught to hate us. They are taught that we are less than. And each generation adds to that story, adds to that hate, the ignorance, the racism, prejudice, whatever words you want to put on it. Each generation adds to that. And each generation of my people, my family, have a harder and harder time to understand where this pain comes from, because they don't know. And then I remember my grandpa doing this. It changes us in here, changes our body, our blood, our minds, our heart. It changes us. He talked about how it changes those little things you can't see, he said. Cells. He drew little pictures because I was probably 6 or 7 at the time. Drew a bunch of little cells. He said, these change in your blood, they change. So because of all the things that my people, my families, all my brothers and sisters across Turtle Island, the Aborigines in New Zealand and Australia, all beautiful brown-skinned people from around the world have gone through this same thing. We're all taught that we are less than. So yes, when your DNA is changed, when the very cells in your body have changed so drastically because of the treatment that we have gone through for hundreds of years, anywhere from 300 to 600 years, depending on the coast that you're on. Because of that, because of the traumas, it creates dis-ease, disease within us. Cancers, diabetes, heart attacks, lung problems, the list goes on and on and on. And so what happens? Because we feel such shame in being homo, because that's what we were taught, we attract people into our lives who are more than happy to reinforce those beliefs that we have in ourselves, even though we don't even know that we have those thoughts. And they hurt and abuse us more. Until one day we realize, when we wake up and we realize, no, that's not who we are. Because we were kind and gentle and loving and caring and welcomed the weaker ones into our lives, helped them to survive the cold winters, showed them where to gather food when they had no clue, taught them what was good to eat and what to avoid so you didn't poison yourself. What do we get? How were we rewarded? They took away all rights and titles to lands, everything that we owned. And people say, well, it's because you guys said nobody owns the land. And I say, just because we did not understand your English words does not make it true, because you want to believe it. Because my great-grandfather Manette taught me, we are the land, and the land is us. We come from the land, we will go back to the land. We are the land, the waters, the sky, the trees, the plants, the animals. We are a part of all of that. That is who we are. And that disconnect that was forced upon us, taught to us, shoved down our throats, it's hard to see through the pain that gets handed down, and we don't understand, why am I hurting? We don't understand that it is handed down to us. It has become a part of us. And so when we become ill from all these different diseases that we've never had before, we don't understand why. Where does it come from? People who have hip problems, who have really bad hips, who have spinal problems, all come from not feeling supported, not feeling safe in their life, unable to carry the weight they carry, the trauma, the abuse that has been handed down to them through generation after generation. And it becomes too heavy to carry. So then they have neck problems and spine problems and hip problems. And gee, they can't walk very well because their knees are having troubles, or their ankles or their feet. Their heart is hurting, so they have heart attacks because their heart just cannot handle any more pain at all. We don't understand when we hurt somebody else that it's not because we want to hurt somebody else, it's because we're hurting. And I see it all the time in the people that I work with. They hurt others because they're hurting inside. They drink because they're hurting. They take drugs because they're hurting and trying to escape. And what happens? The medical system says, oh, they're just alcoholics. They live on the street. Who cares about what happens to them? They're drug addicted. Who cares? Well, their families care. Their loved ones care. I know people, I have friends who go down to the streets all the time looking for their loved ones, just to say, I love you and I'm still here. But that trauma that has been handed down generation after generation, it manifests in our bodies because we don't know what to do with it because of that change. Because of that change. And so when doctors say to me, well, what can we do? How can we decolonize? Well, first you have to decolonize this. You have to stop looking at us and seeing worthlessness. Look at us and see Holmu, human being, because that's what we are. That's what we all are. Every last one of us, no matter what race, what color, what religion, we're all human beings and we all need to treat each other better. But until the medical system can get over their prejudices, their racism, their biases against us, how can we heal? How can we change things for the better for all of us? For all of us. Because when you help me, it helps you in some way or another. Maybe it'll help you get rid of the feeling that we're less than. Maybe it'll help you get rid of the shame and the guilt that was handed down through your generations and your DNA and cells. But until that happens, we're going to be stuck in the same boat that we're in. Sometimes I'll say that we're in the same canoe. but it's bigger than that. We're in the same spaceship hurtling through space 35,000 miles an hour. Excuse me. We're in this together. And we cannot keep treating each other with that disregard, that disrespect, the dishonor that has been the way of life for us. Because when you do that to us, you hurt yourself as well. Karma is a two-way street. What you do to me, you do to yourself. When you laugh at me and point at me and say, she talks funny, or she looks funny, or whatever, you're really making fun of yourself, not me. But it's taken me a lot of years of hard work for me to get to this stage where I understand that. But not every one of my family, my relatives from Turtle Island, no one understand that. But I'm doing my best to share that knowledge with everybody. Decolonization means everybody. Taking away the way that things were being done and changing it. Changing it so that it's better for all concerned. If it's so one-sided, that wheel is out of balance and the cart starts to go like this and it makes funny noises and somebody gets thrown out onto the ground, somebody gets sick, whatever, because it's not balanced. My great-grandfather taught me we have 4 bodies: physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional. And then we have our soul, our spirit. And when one of those is out of balance, the whole wheel gets out of balance. And either the wheel breaks or the cart goes. People are a part of that wheel, all people. You cannot have it benefit one group of people and think, oh, wow, this is great. This is great. Great for you, maybe, but not great for everybody. It can't be. Because like it or not, we're all a part of this world. And when you push down a race or a religion, you're pushing yourself down. When your life goes sideways and you don't understand why, and somebody in your family gets really, really sick, and it breaks your heart and you just want to die because you're hurting so bad, it's because that loved one has taken on your karmic debt, your energy debt of the prejudice and the racism that you're putting out there. Because that person loves you so much, they are willing to sacrifice themselves for you. I know that's kind of hard to hear, but it's what I've been taught. Everything that I'm sharing with you are things that I have been taught and have learned along the way. If we treat a group of people that they are nothing, that they are less than, unworthy, not lovable, the list goes on and on. We're really saying that to ourselves because they are the mirror for us. When you look at me and people say, you're so smart, you're so articulate, you're so this, you're so that, and I just smile and nod, because I know they are looking at themselves. They're not looking at me because they don't want to look at me. So we all have a long way to go in our healing journey. And until the medical system catches up with us in our way of knowing and being, we're all doomed to failure. But I know we can do it. You just have to give a little more love. So I raise my hands in gratitude to you for listening, for sharing a part of your valuable time and your day with me and with us. And I wish you peace, love, joy, and happiness. And I ask the Creator to bless you, to keep you having an open heart and an open mind and having that desire to make the world a better place for all of us. Thank you.
A big merci, Haichka, Elder Doris. I raise my hands to you for speaking truth into this space. You know, the reason we share these difficult stories is so once we know, what can we do differently, right? And so we're just so grateful for you coming in and speaking truth into the space. I just want to acknowledge that I know that through the chat box, this is very impactful for some folks. And just to share some teachings I have from some elders, and that water is medicine. So sometimes when we have tears, that's just bringing medicine into the place, into our space. So we're going to roll over. Oh,
it helps us to, a study was done a long time ago on Napoleon's tears because he would always keep his tears in these little vials. And somebody did a study on a chemical composition study on all of them, and every tear was different. So when we're angry, our tears are very strong and toxic. And when we're sad or happy, whatever, our tears are different chemical compositions. So when you hold them in, it makes you sick. Another lesson from my great-grandpa. So let them out, share it with the world, because colonization told us don't have feelings, don't have emotions, don't cry, and don't talk about it. Well, guess what? I'm talking about it, and I'm going to cry if I want.
So we're going to move into the Q&A here. We're going to do our best to answer as many questions as possible. So a question that kind of got generated is, you were talking about your great-great-grandfather Manette and his kind of way of protecting the younger generations and to pass on to that knowledge in a time when it was very unsafe to do so. So we were hoping maybe you could talk a little bit more about Indigenous resistance in the face of this this history, these stories.
I don't know if he ever thought of it as resistance. I think he thought of it as it was something he had to do. It was his responsibility, his duty, his honor to pass along what he knew to me. And he told me, you share the knowledge, you don't hold on to it. Knowledge is ours to share. It is not ours to keep, he said over and over and over. So I share it with my kids, with my grandkids, with my nieces and nephews, my grandnieces and nephews, and anybody from the community and the world who wants to listen. I will share it because we have to pass it on. If I die, it stops. Doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you for that answer. I think it really answers that question and provides a lot of space for people to reflect more on what that looks like. Another question that kind of came up, and we've had a few that are similar, and it's folks are wondering, how can they begin to look at their unconscious bias? Sometimes we're unaware that we carry these biases with us, and as you're saying, you know, they're attached to our DNA as well. So what can we begin to do to kind of take a look at us and kind of self-reflect?
The best and safest way that I can suggest is to get a white candle always a white candle, because white is the presence of all colors, and it is the color of the Great Spirit, all colors. So light your white candle and put it in front of you in a beautiful candle holder, stuck to the bottom of a can. If that's all you have, who cares? As long as you have the candle lit and in front of you where you can see the fire. Because our angels, guides, guardians, whatever names you want to put on them, can only see natural light. So the sun, which is a huge ball of fire, or a fire that we build in the backyard or out camping, and a candle is what? A little tiny fire. So what happens when you light the candle or light a fire is you're calling your angels, your guides, your guardians, your ancestors to you, and they will come and they sit right against you, tight to your body. People always say, oh, I love candles. They make me feel so good. People say, oh, I love campfires. They make me feel so good. They're so warm and inviting and loving. Well, that's why. It's because all your ancestors, your guides, your guardians, Great Spirit, everybody comes to be with you, and they sit right tight with you. So when you stare into the flame of the candle in front of you, say, I am protected, and then invite whatever words will come to you, because it might take a while. It's a form of meditation. Don't be afraid of that word. It just means deep thought. And allow something to come in from your guides. They're always willing to talk to us. We just don't always listen. And so now is the time to listen and pay attention to your actions and your thoughts. The words that come out of your mouth, we have 17 seconds in which to change a thought before we even have the thought. So it takes practice and practice and practice to change the way that you think, but you can do it. I did it, you can do it. It's easy to do, it just takes practice. So when something comes out of you and it makes you upset and cry and whatever emotions that come up, it's okay, it's a good thing to feel that sadness or frustration or hurt or whatever it is, because that means it's coming out. You're changing who you are and how you think. And that's a good thing. Rejoice in it. Yay! Thank you.
I really love that you said that, because another question that came out of the chat box is, how do we begin to break the cycle of prejudice that's in the healthcare system? And I think you've just answered that as well. It begins with that self-reflection and that process of reevaluating. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Healing the world starts with us, with me, with this person right here first.
Another question that came from the chat box, and a few people have asked this, is, are there services that you would like to see in place that would best support Indigenous patients? Is there kind of a wish you'd like to see?
Wow. Vancouver Coastal Health already has an Indigenous cultural safety program. I would like to see every single person, right from the janitor to the rest of the staff, anybody who volunteers or anything with the hospitals, to go through that training. I would like to see that program extended beyond a half a day, because a half a day isn't long enough. And for the medical system to realize the value of that training. Instead of being run off their feet, that maybe they'd have a minute or two to make their notes in between patients, instead of flying by the seat of their pants up and down the halls until the end of the day, and then they have to sit and try and remember what happened. Well, if we can make others be healthier and happier by learning about these things, let's do it. take away someone else's pain, it helps, it only benefits me. It only will help me if I can help somebody else. Thank you.
Yeah, I so appreciate you, acknowledging that this is work that needs to happen at all levels in the healthcare system. Sometimes when we have these talks about Indigenous cultural safety or these talks on history and self-reflection, sometimes people can think, oh, well, I'm not in a public-facing role, or I don't provide direct healthcare services. But we know that if we want to create this system change, right, it takes everybody to do this work together, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Another question that some folks had is if maybe you could talk about what decolonization would look like, or just what that term means. I think some folks were curious as to what the term decolonization means.
Decolonization is changing the way that you think about someone else being less than you, about creating laws to make it illegal, to take away someone's right to do what you do, what you take for granted every day. Like I said, it was illegal for us to travel from our village to my relatives in Tsleil-Waututh. And the only reason why I have relatives in Tsleil-Waututh is because when the Indian agent came here, he went around, and when the Squamish had come into our territory to ask permission to fish, and we said yes, the Indian agent drove them all to shore and said, this is your land now. This is where you live. And my family members who had gone to Burrard Inlet, what is known as Burrard Inlet, to gather oysters and seafood from over there, they were told, this is your land now. This is where you're going to stay. This is your reserve. So when you take away those kind of thoughts, you're decolonizing. Any thought, word, or deed that makes somebody less than you is colonizing. Anything, any law that makes it illegal for a person to be who they are is colonizing. Any thought, word, or deed who makes you look at somebody and think so fast in your head, ugh, it's one of them. Those thoughts happen so fast, we don't even know they happen until we're going, ugh. That's colonization. We have to change the way that we think, period. Change the way we think. Change the systems, the structure of the systems that are in place, because they aren't working. They never have, at least not for us. I mean, we could go for hours. The political system, the political structure, they keep changing it to benefit themselves and those who are really rich and support them. That's colonization. When it takes away your rights, that's when people start getting a little freaked out. Well, now you have a little hint about how we feel. So what are you going to do about it? It cannot just be up to me to decolonize, because I can have workshops every single day on how to stop thinking the way you think. But people have to do the work too. You can't just ask. And like I said at the beginning, there is no list of 1 through 10 that I can just hand over to you and say, this is how you decolonize. It starts with the way you think, the way you act, thoughts, words, and deeds. Are they working? Are they kind and loving to everybody, not just you and yours? Are they kind and loving to everything and everybody? Doesn't matter the color of their skin or the slant of their eyes or anything. Are they inclusive? Do you include us in your thoughts when you think of betterment for the world? And if not, that's colonization.
Thank you for sharing, Elder Doris. I really appreciate you saying, that this decolonization, again, I sound like I'm a broken record here, this starts with self-reflection and starts within. And then once we kind of have done that work, we kind of get these glasses, if you will, to see the systems around us and how they are unjust and are created to only benefit some, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I
What
realize,
gives me, sorry,
oh,
I just want to say this quickly. My great grandfather Manette said, when you get to be my age, things will start to change quickly. Because he's been doing this kind of work his whole life, and all down the line to me, I'm only one in a long line of people who are doing this decolonization work. So I'm happy it's starting to change. I'm so happy.
well, I'm going to build on that happiness and just really, again, I'm going to raise my hands to you, Elder Doris, a big haichka marcy for being here with us today. I think this has been a super impactful session for folks. I can tell by the chat box that people are already beginning that self-reflection process, right?
Awesome.
For folks on the call, this session will be recorded. So if you want to go back and listen to Elder Doris's wisdom and all the teachings she shared with us, it'll be available on the VCH internet site under Aboriginal Health. So thank you so much, Elder Doris, and I wish the rest of you a wonderful day as well.
Yes, have a beautiful day, because it's gorgeous out. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you.